Previously on
And
Balls.
on the line, I don't even know how to do, what introduction would do this man justice. An absolute legend of Formula One. I don't know how to even better that. Mr. Murray Walker on the line from the United Kingdom.
Hello, Murray.
Hello, everybody.
Murray, good afternoon. Welcome to Balls Visual Radio, and thank you so much for making time to speak to us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
And I guess start with the obvious question: how are you?
I'm knocking on 89 in October.
Yes, on the 10th of October, you turn 89 years old.
That's right.
It seems
I
like
don't feel like 89, mind you, but I am.
You don't sound like it either, I must admit.
Yeah, I was telling Johnny before we went live that it seems like just yesterday that you were commentating Formula One, and if I think of my childhood, I mean, through the 90s when I used to watch Formula One races on a Sunday afternoon with my dad, it's your voice that I remember, and I'm sure many people around the world feel exactly the same way. You were the voice of Formula One.
Well, yeah, I guess I was. I started in 1948. Was the first. 1949 was the first commentary I ever gave. That was the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. That was a year before Formula One began. And then I was mostly the BBC's motorcycle man for many years because motorcycles are my first love. And I actually started doing all the Grand Prix when the BBC started doing all of them in 1978. And then I carried on until I retired. And I'm still doing stuff. Funnily enough, I was doing commentary at the Goodwood Revival this weekend, which is just over.
So it wasn't in those years then, Murray, it wasn't even called Formula One, was it?
No, it was just Grand Prix racing in those days. And then in 1950, the governing body decided that they would have a world championship because the motorcycle world had started a world championship in 1949, and Formula One followed suit the year after. And there wasn't a constructors' championship until 1958. But of course, it's been an enormous success. Largely due, it has to be said, to Bernie Ecclestone, who has driven the whole thing upwards and onwards to the heights that it's at now. And it's one of the most watched sports in the world now. And it's a worldwide discipline, and it's all down to Bernie.
When did you decide, or when did it become clear to you that you were going to make a career out of being a motor racing and motorbike, but mainly Formula One commentator?
To be honest, I mean, my father was a professional racing motorcyclist and a very successful one. He won the TT in the Isle of Man, and he would have been world champion in 1928 if there'd been a world championship with the same rules as there is now. So I grew up in a motorsport atmosphere, and I was in the army during the war in the tank regiment. And when I came out, I started racing bikes in the fond belief that I could show my father how it really ought to be done. And I very rapidly discovered there was no way I was going to show him how it was done because he was infinitely better than I would ever be. And I rode in trials, and I won a gold medal in the International 6 Days trial in 49. But it wasn't really until I retired from my job, because I had a job in the advertising business for 37 years, and the broadcasting was just a hobby. And it didn't cease to be a hobby until round about 1982, 83.
Do you religiously watch all the Grand Prix now, and how does it compare to when you were involved?
Oh yeah, I watch every second of them because
Yeah.
I still do a lot of work for the BBC on Formula One. Unfortunately, you don't see it there because it's on the website, and I don't think you can get the BBC Formula One website in South Africa.
No, we can't.
Now this, I don't know if you can hear a dreadful whine, but
Yeah,
I
is that a fax coming through?
this is what always happens to me when I'm on a long distance call.
Oh, would you like us to
It'll
phone?
go in a
Would you
minute
like
if
it?
you don't mind hanging on for a
Yeah,
moment?
it's fine. I'm sure you're being monitored or something.
No,
It's on now.
it's the
It's on
BBC
now.
monitoring you.
Where was I? I forgot.
MI5.
It's news of the world.
Yes.
Where was I? I've forgotten.
You were telling, or Johnny was asking you whether Formula One has changed between 1949 and 2012.
Oh, yeah, of course it's changed enormously. I mean, when I started, the engine was in front of the driver, and the drivers wore cotton trousers and a T-shirt and a linen helmet. They had no safety belts. There were no safety precautions worth talking about at the circuit. There were no runoff areas, no gravel traps, no Armco. 4 or 5 people were killed every year, and I won't say people didn't think anything of it, because of course they did, but the attitude towards death just after the war was nothing like it is now. So the biggest change in Formula One that I've seen over the years is safety, and it's very sad that Professor Sid Watkins, the man who was responsible for most of it, has just died.
Yes. Very, very, very sad indeed, and I'm sure he was someone that you must have known very, very well.
Oh, I knew him very well indeed, and a nicer man never drew breath, a more helpful, kinder man never drew breath, and of course he did an enormous amount for safety in Formula One, because he was responsible for the circuits providing proper medical facilities, responsible for local hospitals being responsible for providing facilities. He made sure that there were helicopters to take the drivers from where they had been injured up to the hospitals. And it's down to Sid that so many of the safety things like head and neck support, better helmets, and safer cars have happened.
I was talking.
When they put a man on the moon, they could stop this sort of thing happening, wouldn't you?
I thought you were flatlining on us for a minute there.
It sounds like Morse code.
Yeah, I've got you now.
I was talking last week, and I was saying when we heard of Professor Sid Watkins passing, that quite ironic, because yes, he pioneered safety, and how ironic and a very sad irony that he should have been speaking to Ayrton Senna the day before Ayrton died, and on the day that Roland Ratzenberger died, trying to convince Ayrton to pack it in.
Yeah. Well, I was there, of course, and it was my sad job to commentate on that job, which is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And it was the worst weekend in Formula One in my lengthy career, because Senna was a very exceptional man, and it was an appalling thing, because I had seen 3 people crash at the Tamburello, which is where Senna was killed, in identical circumstances. Michele Alboreto, Gerhard Berger, and Nelson Piquet, and all of them were perfectly all right. And my immediate reaction when Senna crashed was, wow, that's a big one, because I thought these other 3 were all right, and so he would be too. But of course it was far more than that, and Sid Watkins was on the scene almost immediately, because Sid used to sit in a race in a very fast saloon car at the end of the pit lane, ready to go out if there was an accident. So he was there with Senna within seconds, and he realized immediately that it was terminal, because the driver stuck out of the cockpit a lot more then than they do now, since safety features have been introduced, and a piece of the suspension penetrated his helmet and went into his skull. And Sid knew immediately that it was terminal, but because of Italian law, they took him away in a helicopter, and he wasn't actually declared dead until they turned off the life support machine in the hospital.
Do you believe that the Senna-Prost rivalry was, or the greatest rivalry that the sport has seen so far?
Oh no, there's been many like it. I mean, Nigel, here we go again. Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet took a lot of beating. René Arnoux and Alain Prost was the same. And before the war, there were some very big rivalries in the German Mercedes-Benz team. There was a driver called Luigi Fagioli, who was one of the top drivers for Mercedes-Benz, and he got so angry with Rudolf Cracchiola on one occasion that he went after him with a lump hammer and a knife.
Wow.
I don't think anybody in Formula One's ever done that.
No. Senna's death was obviously the low light of your commentating career, what were some of the highlights? There must have been many, so I won't ask you to pinpoint one.
Well, I suppose the highlight was when my friend Damon Hill won the championship in 1996. Because
I remember that.
I knew his double world champion father, Graham Hill, very well, and Graham Hill had been in the commentary box with me as my pundit on several occasions, and I'd seen Damon grow up, and when Graham was killed, the family were in very difficult circumstances financially, but Betty Hill brought the children up, Samantha and Bridget and Damon, beautifully. And then Damon was earning his living as a dispatch rider, and he became motorcycle champion of Brands Hatch, riding a 350 Yamaha. And then Betty persuaded him to go to cars, and he had to work very hard indeed to get where he was. So in 1996, when he crossed the line at Suzuka to become world champion, I felt very emotional about it, and that's when I famously said, "I've got to stop now. I've got a lump in my throat."
I remember that.
Yeah, that was exactly what happened.
And
Nigel Mansell's a great friend of mine, and it was a big moment for me when Nigel won the championship in 1992. And similarly, I worked with James Hunt for 13 years, about which I could talk to you for about 13 years, I suspect.
But it's so darn interesting.
The greatest driver you've had the privilege of watching over the years?
Well, it's all so subjective, this who is the greatest driver, because there's no common yardstick that you can measure drivers through the ages against. I mean, was Rudolf Cracciolo a better driver than Fangio? Was Sterling Moss a better driver than Senna? Was Jim Clark a better driver than Prost? You've got no common yardstick you can compare them about, but subjectively, the greatest for me is Tazio Nuvolari, who was the Italian who drove before the war, and most people look blankly at me when I say Tazio Nuvolari. But as far as Formula One concerned, without a doubt, Juan Manuel Fangio, but very close to him, Sterling Moss, who never actually won the World Championship, which is a criticism of the championship rather than Sterling.
Johnny, you have a question?
Yeah, Mary, what did you make of Michael Schumacher's announcing his retirement, then returning to Formula One? Do you think it was the right thing to do?
Well, he was after when he retired in, when was it, 2005, 2006. He'd been world champion 7 times. He'd won, 91 Grand Prix, and he was worn out. It's not me saying that, it's him saying it. He'd had enough. And there are those also who say that Luca Montezemolo, the boss of Ferrari, wanted him out so that he could replace him with Kimi Raikkonen. But whatever, there's no doubt about the fact that Schumacher was worn out. And he then took up motorcycle racing, which is something I've admired him for enormously, because it's much harder to go from 4 wheels to 2 than from 2 to 4. And he was fairly successful at that. The bug was still biting, and he came back. And he came back because he wanted to, and he's enjoyed himself immensely. And he's still very, very good. I mean, he took pole position for the Monaco Grand Prix this year until he lost it through no fault of his own. And I still think that Schumacher could win races if Mercedes could supply him with a car, which sadly they haven't been able to do so far.
Murray, the one thing I remember about your commentary, obviously the fact that how excited you used to get, but the unique thing about you was because you used to get so excited, did you used to commentate every race standing? Is that right?
Oh yeah, there's only one way to do it as far as I'm concerned, because I used, as you probably know, to get very excited, I used to move about the box a lot and pointing at the screen and looking out of the window, and you can also deliver much better if you're standing up, because if you're standing up your shoulders go back and your chest is inflated, whereas if you're sitting down your shoulders go forward and your chest is deflated. But it was mostly a psychological thing. I felt freer if I was standing up to deliver.
So as I wait,
hear this noise,
as I wait for that it's going to go now.
Yes.
It's gone. And now, your favorite track?
My favourite track, my favourite track is Spa in Belgium, because it's a road track and it's got a lot of history, and all the famous drivers have driven there, and the top people have won there, and it's in the glorious hilly Ardennes region of Belgium, which is a very attractive part of the country. And you put all that lot together and it makes a very dramatic place to have a Formula One race.
I just have, sorry, the line's terrible, so I just wanted to Murray, can you still hear me? Murray?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll wrap it up. I know the line's very bad, but I just wanted to ask you. Okay, let's wrap it up. I just wanted to ask you, final question. Do you miss commentating still, or?
Oh yeah, of course. I miss it desperately, because if you do it I did it for 53 years, and if you do it as long as I did it, and you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed it, and you stop, you're going to miss it. But I'm an old man, and you have to stop sometime, and I don't think that physically I've got the stamina now to do all the travelling. That's the killer, in and out of aeroplanes for most of the year, and out of the 20 races this year, about 12 of them are long haul. No, I had a jolly good innings, and it doesn't owe me anything, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Well, Murray, like you said in your final commentary in 2001, a very sad moment for all your fans, and you just said thank you, and we'd like to say thank you for joining us here on Balls Visual Radio. It's been an absolute privilege and pleasure to be able to chat to you this afternoon.
Thank you, and thank you for putting up with this dreadful line.
I was going to ask you to say it's go, go, go for Balls Visual Radio, but I won't ask you to do that with that drum, that hubbub going on in the background there.
Well, why don't we wait for it to go? It'll go.
I'll say it.
Will you say it?
Because it doesn't go on all that long. It's infuriating, but it doesn't go on for all that long.
If you could do that for us, I could then retire.
So, watch the lights. 5 lights, 4 lights, 3 lights, 2 lights, and it's go, go, go.
Oh, beautiful. Can you say here on Balls Radio?
No, you can't. Murray, thank you so much for...
I'm going to go, go, go now. I've had enough of this line.
Okay, Murray, thank you, and keep well, and happy birthday for next month.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Murray.
Bye, Murray.
Bye.
Sure, that was testing.
What a legend.
Shame, I honestly thought he'd flatlined there for a minute.
Yes.
Anyway, there we go, the absolute legend. Murray Walker, Sasha Martinenga, eat your heart out.
2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mondays to Fridays live on balls.co.za. Balls.co.za.